empty if anybody wants a better view of this. And just for the record, I am standing up. So, first of all, we have a really exciting session today. We have a couple of panels, some lightning rounds, and I think everybody's discovered by now that GODAN, in its excitement, has consistently tried to squeeze 100 pounds in a 50-pound sack for all of our sessions. And we really want this one to be interactive. So the title of it is Global Open Data, Pipe Dream or Global Solution. And so we wanted the title and we want the discussion to be very provocative. And we hope that we can, in each of these sessions within it, really get your kind of feedback. So first of all, I would like to start by introducing our first speaker to my left. So President Mark Keenum has had a very encompassing career that involves leadership in academia roles, in government roles, in foundational roles. Am I leaving something out? I think there's a lot more. He's currently, since 2009, he's been president of Mississippi State University, and additionally, he is on the SEC Executive Committee. He's also the vice president of the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Resources at FAR, who is a co-sponsor, one of the sponsors of this event, and very much behind open data. And I will let him say the rest. Thanks so much.
Well, good morning, everyone. I hope all of you enjoyed the GODAN Summit as much as I have thus far. I think it's been very informative. And I would say even very eye-opening for someone like me who's not spending every moment of his day working in this area of agricultural data, but to understand a lot of the issues and challenges that we face. You know, I represent university, of course, president of Mississippi State. And I'll say that, university research, outreach, and teaching, we've been helping feed the world for a long time. And that's a role that we relish and we cherish in what we're able to do. I think we have vital expertise at our universities that contribute to every aspect of the challenge that we face. From the laboratory, to the farm, to the market, and to the table. I believe that working on the challenges of food security and global hunger is a critical issue. It's something that I've been very blessed in my career to be involved in from the time that I was an agricultural economics student, undergraduate at Mississippi State. Before becoming the president of Mississippi State University 8 years ago, I served as undersecretary for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I headed up the Farm and Foreign Agriculture Services and had direct oversight of all humanitarian food aid programs administered by USDA. As undersecretary, you can imagine I worked very closely with USAID. I worked very closely with the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Food Program, and numerous NGOs over my time at USDA. Since coming back to Mississippi State again more than 8 years ago, we reestablished our International Institute at Mississippi State, and we've been very active over the past several years, working with the United Nations, the FAO, the WFP, and other major organizations. As Paula mentioned, I'm very fortunate that I was appointed by Secretary Bill Sack to serve on the new Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, which was established in the last Farm Bill, with a $200 million grant to this foundation to be used to expand on agricultural research for our future. Of course, the issue of data, open information is real critical to us and our board of directors of the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research. I also was appointed to serve on the USAID Feed the Future Oversight Committee that was very successful in helping to get it authorized officially this year, something that we've tried for many years. So I was very glad to be a part of that. So I guess my point is, I've spent a lot of time working on this issue, as many of you in this room have, and are concerned about our future. And as me as a university president, when I stand in front of groups of young 18 to 20-year-olds at our university and thinking about their life and their future, I quite frequently tell our students that when you get to be as old as I am, by the time you're in your mid-50s, the world is going to look a whole lot different than it looks today. We're not going to have 7 billion people for one thing, of which nearly 1 billion people are malnourished, as we know today. But we're going to have nearly 10 billion people on our planet by the time you're my age. And how we're able to feed nearly 3 billion more people at our global dinner table over the next 3+ decades is going to be a tremendous challenge for planet Earth, for every citizen on our planet. That's a big challenge. And I want our students and students all across the country to understand that's their future and they're part of it. And we're going to be looking to them to help address these critical issues. But again, my career opportunities help me better understand the magnitude and seriousness of the problems that we all in this room understand better. And as Paula mentioned, I was very fortunate and very blessed to be asked to be part of an outstanding organization called PUSH, Presidents United to Solve Hunger. There's more than 90 university presidents, institutions around the globe that have signed up to be part of this initiative, to also bring that message to their students and highlight the importance of what universities can do to help address the issue of global hunger. And we've seen in the summit here today, yesterday with GODAN, and all the numerous examples. And I could list a whole list of things that we're doing with just our university campus to make our information, to make our data available to other users so that we're not all replicating the same thing. That's what this whole effort is about, to address how we can use big data, which I've been informed, big data needs to be converted into smart data so that we can actually use the information. That's a big issue for us because there are a lot of obstacles that we face going forward. How do we take, again, all this information and put it to a useful means and use it as smart data? If we can address it and doing it in a way that would be beneficial to agriculture and nutrition for our future, that's huge. That's critical. And if we can, how can open data or smart data advance our global food security? If it can't, then why not? What do we need to do to overcome the challenges? And what is the role of institutions like research universities? What's our mission in this area of discovery? You know, we're part of the discovery, the curation, the analyzation, and the dissemination of data for knowledge, for best practices. What about the role of the private sector? We heard some about that this morning. We often see that data is a valuable intellectual property that is to be protected and held closely and not shared. How will we address privacy concerns? What happens if data is misinterpreted? How can we develop a standard platform for sharing data and sharing information? Who pays for the technology? Of course, none of this is easy. And how we will link researchers, practitioners, to service providers. But it's going to be initiatives like this GODAN gathering that brings all of these leaders from around the world to be able to share information, talk about the challenges, talk about the obstacles, and how we can collaboratively work together and get to know one another so we can be able to communicate effectively. So I'm proud that we have this wonderful conference that we're here to participate in today and this week. We plan on tackling these issues, and we plan to address it because we have no choice. Because as I said in the onset, we have a daunting challenge ahead of us, and we got to all work together collectively to to address the critical issues of our future. Well, now, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce a very distinguished speaker that we have with us here this morning, Dr. Glenda Humiston. She is the Vice President for the University of California's Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Dr. Humiston was appointed Vice President of the University of California System Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources in August of 2015. She was born in California, but she was raised on a cattle ranch in Colorado where she was a member of the 4-H. She has more than 25 years of experience working in public policy development and program implementation, supporting sustainability. She served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Tunisia, as Executive Director of a nonprofit organization advocating farmland preservation and value-added agricultural development, and served several years as a consultant of environmental and agricultural issues throughout the West. Dr. Humiston served President Bill Clinton as Deputy Undersecretary for Natural Resources and Environment at USDA from 1998 to 2001. She managed the Sustainable Development Institute at the 2002 World Summit for Sustainable Development in South Africa and the 2006 World Water Forum in Mexico City. In 2009, she was appointed by President Obama to serve as the California State Director for Rural Development with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Dr. Humiston produced a widely acclaimed guidebook on access to capital and has led efforts to bring rural issues to the forefront for the state's economic summit for policymakers in California. She earned her PhD from UC Berkeley in environmental science policy and management in 2009. She has a master's degree in international agricultural development from UC Davis and a bachelor's degree in animal science from Colorado State University. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Glenda Humiston.
Thank you for those kind words. It's really a pleasure to be here today. I saw my slides here, so they're going to pop up there in just a second. I hope. They're on my screen. Do I need to do something? Are you going to put them on those screens?
Parse this complex area. So with that, I'd just like to very briefly introduce our lightning round speakers. I'd like to welcome up to the stage Danielle Jimenez, Charles Chuck McEwen, Samantha Custer, and Julia Finkelstein, and John Harris, sorry. Danielle is a colleague of mine at SIA, and likewise a scientist for us at the International Center for Tropical Agriculture. He's an agronomist, he leads our big data team, and really is helping to push forward the use of big and open data as a tool and a resource for small producers. Charles McEwen is a decision support geospatial and outreach practitioner with experience in higher ed and the private sector. He's worked at Michigan State and currently serves as a consultant on numerous analytics projects around the world, many related to energy at this point in time. Samantha Custer directs ADA's policy and communications effort to encourage greater visibility and uptake and the use of open data for decision making, advocacy, and research. Her efforts have helped mainline transparency with respect to what donor funding is actually doing throughout the world. This is a huge effort. We see this in many instances, and this is just one more piece of important information in these large problem areas. Julia Finkelstein is I know I'm not going to be able to pronounce this correctly, the Follett Sesquicentennial Faculty Fellow. How do you do? All right. An assistant professor of epidemiology and nutrition in the Division of Nutritional Sciences at Cornell. She's very busy and shares her time with St. John's Research Institute in Bangalore, India. Epidemiologist with expertise in the design and conduct of randomized controlled trials, cohort studies, and surveillance programs in resource-limited settings. It really adds an important element to hear from Julia, because one of the things that we have started to realize is there's a lot to be borrowed from multiple disciplines. Randomized controlled trials, something that has been a mainstay in the health community for many years, is now making its way into the development community. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution, but it's just demonstrative of what interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary work has to offer. And John McHarris is a political scientist at Forrester with a wide range of experience in analytics and the application of analysis to programs in food security and vulnerability. John has a lot of experience working with geographic information systems and related data, has worked for the World Food Program as a consultant for the CGIAR, USAID, and many other groups. So with that, please give a warm welcome to our lightning round speakers. They're all probably shaking in fear of their kindness. Okay, friends, the time limit is going to be strictly enforced. We have a clock in the back. It will tick down, and the light will turn yellow at the before the mark. You have 1 minute to conclude, okay? So with that, I'm going to stay up here and help keep presentations ready and moving. And no, I actually had time allotted. That's the cool thing about leading the session. All right, I'd like to welcome up Daniel.
Thanks, Steve. So the idea of this presentation is to share with you what will be the some data of the CGI air platform, or at least what we envision from what we envisage from a non-profit organization of the CG. And we think that one opportunity will be to democratize big data for small-scale farmers, and to facilitate the access to this type of information. So throughout the presentation, first I'm going to talk a little bit about what's the current situation. Then I will briefly explain what's the situation for the CGIAR, and then I will make a point on what we're missing in order to democratize big data for small-scale farmers. And at the end, we will see what we at least consider will be the opportunity for all of us. The opportunities for all of us. So what's the current situation? Many initiatives, companies around the globe, and not only in the United States, but seriously around the world, collecting data from so many different sources and translating this data into information to support farmers on how to make more informed decisions, increase productivity, enhance productivity. And some of them sell products or software. But the thing is that all farmers are unproblematic. Not all farmers adopt new technologies. Some of them are unproblematic to adopt these, are early adopters of technologies, but farmers, for example, in Latin America or in Asia, in Africa, that is definitely not the case. So how can we contribute to this platform, with this CGI platform, to reduce this inequity between big farmers and small farmers? So regarding the CG, we have made progress on some fronts. We have the International Rice Research Institute with this tool of nutrient management called Rice Crop Manager that actually my colleague Marco presented yesterday during the precision agriculture session. We have CIMIT, which is the International Center for Breeding of Maize and Wheat, with Masagro, which is a huge initiative, and they're really good at collecting and managing information. And we have SIA, with some competences and skills on the analysis of data. Actually, SIA 2 years ago was awarded here in New York by United Nations as one of the winners of the Big Data Climate Change, with the presence of the heads of states in the climate summit. So I'm pretty confident about what I'm going to say. Well, because my next slide is what we're really missing. And we're really missing is the academy. I'm the leader of the team that was awarded 2 years ago here. And we're always wondering, we're just a bunch of agronomists and young statisticians, but we're really missing data scientists from the United States, from the universities, and that's my point actually. We're really missing the academy, critical mass, professional staff, And not only for the type of work that I did, but I'm sure that across the city there are so many initiatives that will take so much benefit of real science, I mean formal science, more rigorous science, that can contribute to the type of work we are doing. Not only data scientists, computer science experts, ICT experts, and why not? I mean, to think Silicon Valley vision, for example. So, in this last image, you have on the right, like an extension officer working in the United States with, I don't remember what this picture was taken, but on the left, you have, before I became a scientist, I used to work as extension officer working with small-scale farmers in Colombia. So that's where I see the opportunities. I mean, when I started to work, before I became a scientist, I was always wondering, how can we do research for development and really like have real science and take it to the field, to ground this science. So that has been basically the motivation of my career. And I can clearly see the opportunities in this CG platform. So we have the private sector, which are the way ahead in how they sell products, how they with experience in the teamwork and position products actually. We have the CG, I mean, we're good at grounding these type of things. When we were recognized by the United Nations, it wasn't only because we applied some data mining methods, it was because we worked closely with actual farmers. And then we have universities. I mean, so I can really see here a win-win situation for all of us. Thank you.
Good morning. I promised that I have a very simple presentation, and I should be done before the panel electrifies or something else. I come at the whole big data piece, I think, from a slightly different perspective than a lot of the folks here. I spent a big chunk of my career in academia. I've also worked as an independent consultant for the large development funders, as well as direct government service, and sort of my firm and our partners, we've been involved from farm level management questions all the way up to ministerial advisory sort of work. And so as a decision support practitioner, we come at these things sort of a different way, especially depending on the level you're engaging. And so my question is more related to how big data becomes kinetic. Big data is a wonderful concept. Data in itself is highly useful, especially once we've done all the work to make actual information out of it, which is not trivial. But the biggest question is, how do we actually put it in motion? And the title of the slide, I apologize, it's a little messy, but these are all of the open source tools that folks like us that know how to use them can make work. All of them are free. All of them are out there. All of them are also Byzantine and largely indecipherable unless you have in-depth guidance. And all of them are difficult to manage to know what results you're getting. And so the gauntlet that I'm sort of throwing down is that we very, very much need to concentrate on accelerating user capacity and accelerating not only the depth of their capacity, but the breadth. We need at least 10 million more users in a data and analytics environment that's driven by evidence-based culture within the next 10 years. That's the minimum to actually put this thing into motion. There's an old Yiddish proverb that says, for example is not proof. And if we're ever going to get over the sort of anecdotal case study approach, the culture has to change, and everyone has to start feeling more comfortable. I started my career back when it was just ARC. I know Steve predates that. And it was a black box. GIS was magic. It was awesome to be able to visualize data, you capture the attention. We had a whole lot of power from being able to do that. Since it's become largely democratized. You can do everything that we used to do and more for free on a phone. We used to have a direct line from Michigan State University to the San Diego Supercomputer Center to make it work. And that's the kind of infrastructure it used to take. Now it can be done on a phone. So the question now is, how do we improve the analysis, improve the results, and improve the thinking amongst the user base to do the same thing with the rest of our data and analytics platforms? And one of the things I want to talk about is sort of our current data model. This is the Hoover Dam, for those who don't recognize it, and this is how we like to use data. We have these giant reservoirs and impoundments of information and data that really just sort of sit around until somebody accesses them. They're not proactive, they're not reaching out, they're not sharing themselves. And through a whole lot of complicated processes that are controlled by a relatively small number of folks, you can take that data, crunch it through, release the bottom, and you get something useful out of it. In this analogy, of course, it's electricity. But that's generally how the black box folks have also generated power for being the only folks who know how to use data. They generate a tremendous amount of power by impounding it and not democratizing it. And this is the model where we really run into the issues of divides. And there's a whole bunch of them. There's a knowledge divide, there's a gender divide, there's an access divide, there's a speed divide, and these are all of the things that on a larger infrastructure level have to be coped with to get data up to the velocity of usage that we see data accumulate at. Right now we're accumulating massive velocities, but the velocity of usage really isn't growing that much. So this is just illustrating that point. The velocity of data is increasing logarithmically. We're getting 28% more and faster every year. The statistic that I read is that YouTube is now posting 6,000 minutes of video for every minute of actual real time that passes by. And that's just one little platform that's driven mostly by entertainment. But yet the people who are actually using the data, there's about 5 to 6% growth rate in those analysts. The question isn't, do we need to train more high-end analysts? There's a lot of them here. There's a lot of them in this room and throughout this conference. The question is, how do we make everybody an analyst and enable both citizen science on the data collection side, but also citizen science on the analysis and output side? Because while we sit around trying to figure out our crop models, every day there's about 20 billion decisions that are made about cropping systems that we have no influence on. And those range from the government all the way down to the local farmer system. Not sure what that was. Okay. This is a different model. If you forgive the water metaphor, but I'm going to carry it to its conclusion. This is the Nile Delta, where everything's interconnected, there's no impoundment. This was the cradle of civilization because of that lack of impoundment. It's a network that's composed of millions of nodes, all interconnected in such a way that it became the Fertile Crescent and the foundation of civilization. So the next thing we need to think about is, how do we actually evolve networks of users with simple tools that they can connect to each other in groups with a purpose, so they can be nimble and responsive and integrative in their response to problems. Because the vacuum that's out there for decision making will remain out there unless we start to accelerate the user experience. Now, this is a little ancillary to the whole big data theme, but it's critical to having the kind of impact that we want out of it. And so that's sort of the gauntlet, or the challenge that I'm throwing down, is how do we really deeply consider this user issue. Thank you.
Okay, Samantha.
Thank you. Without the right information at their fingertips, decision makers are flying blind, relying on intuition rather than evidence. But in taking action to end hunger, we need to visualize the whole value chain of information, from upstream resources to downstream outcomes. Yet much of this data is hidden behind firewalls and paywalls. Even when the data is publicly available, it's not always put to effective use. My name is Samantha Custer, and I work for AidData, a research and innovation lab that's based at the College of William & Mary. We track who is funding what, where, and to what effect. And as part of GODAN Actions Network, we work to improve the use of open ag and nutrition data around the world. Ending malnutrition and increasing agricultural productivity by 2030 will take money, a lot of it. Fortunately, countries have more choices in their development partners than ever before. official development assistance is a decreasing proportion of funding available for sustainable development. Companies, foundations, and domestic tax revenues will play an ever-growing role. Yet it remains to be seen whether and how these diverse actors will crowd in new resources to achieve SDG 2. The map behind me provides a historical baseline of aid funding committed worldwide between 2000 and 2013 to end hunger. Using a methodology aid data piloted last fall, we can now extend this approach and crack the code to compare aid with other sources of financing for SDG 2 and monitor changes over time. However, this is where we encounter our first open data speed bump. While aid organizations increasingly publish project-level aid on their investments as part of international reporting regimes, other actors seldom make this data available. Even if they do, it is likely not in a comparable format. Aid Data is working to fill this data gap by triangulating information from multiple sources to capture all source financing for the SDGs in several countries. Yet in a world where there are persistent pockets of hunger hidden within countries, a global or national snapshot is not enough. We need to overlay resources with development indicators at the local level to ensure no one is left behind. This map of Honduras behind me goes a step further. It compares the subnational distribution of aid financing to agricultural projects with the percentage of stunted children from a 2011 demographic and health survey. This is only the tip of the iceberg. The increasing availability of spatial and other satellite imagery, such as changes in the size of smallholder farms or distance to market, makes it possible to evaluate the impact of investments to achieve SDG 2 at a relatively low cost. However, here is where we encounter a second open data speed bump. This type of hyper-local analysis relies upon the existence of high-resolution data that is timely, accurate, and freely available. Unfortunately, in countries like Honduras, household and agricultural surveys are conducted only episodically. Meanwhile, statistical capacity is often weakest at the subnational level, as agricultural extension officers and other local officials are often under-resourced and under-trained. There is a third speed bump to overcome when it comes to open data. Even when the data is available, there are no guarantees that it will actually be put to use. Policymakers are bombarded with a cacophony of voices and advice and information. In this teeming marketplace of ideas, who do they listen to? What data do they use, and why? In 2014, Aid Data launched a survey of public, private, and civil society leaders from 126 low and middle-income countries. Nearly 7,000 of these leaders shared insights on the influence of data, specifically external assessments of government performance in shaping their policy decisions. In the lower right-hand quadrant of the graph behind me, you'll see the results for the respondents from the agriculture and rural development sector. And the relatively small size of the bubble indicates that externally produced data is not seen as very influential in shaping reform priorities in this sector. And this raises three implications for the open ag and nutrition movement. Many leaders are open to making policy changes to end hunger. However, there is some groundwork to do to ensure that open data is seen as useful and fit for purpose. And finally, at the end of the day, open data is a necessary but insufficient condition for policy change. Getting to zero hunger will not only require useful data, but political savvy to overcome inertia that impedes the ultimate success of reform efforts. Thank you.
Good morning, Julia Finkelstein, Cornell University, and proud members of PUSH. Over the past decade, we've conducted a number of randomized efficacy trials to target the burden of malnutrition in the most vulnerable populations in resource-limited settings, using approaches including biofortification interventions and food fortification strategies. So anyone who's had experience working in the field knows there are a number of challenges that go along with data collection in resource-limited settings. This is a picture of our data collection unit when we first arrived at one of our partner clinics on the ground in southern India. And this system actually works. If you give, my colleague here, Sister Mary, if you give her a child's name and even a month of birth, she can find a file in less than 90 seconds. So the system works locally. But when you talk about other challenges in terms of real-time data collection, quality assurance, quality control, real-time data cleaning, data management, data access, maintaining confidentiality, maintaining the complexity around informed consent, complex algorithm thereof, along with increasing reporting burdens at every level for funders as well as QA/QC, and of course, participant monitoring and retention to ensure the quality of the randomized trials as well as clinical care. We also work where the rubber hits the road. So this is an overview of Mumbai. It's one of the most densely populated settings on Earth. And even something as simple as recruiting patients and following them up throughout the course of a 1 to 2 year study and ensuring adherence, monitoring retention, and high quality data collection can be challenging, even for something as simple as knowing where someone lives without addresses, without street names, and of course, when monsoons hit, without roads to walk on. So these are real-time challenges, and we are working to target some of these challenges, developing innovative strategies in-house, including custom-built smartphone and tablet-based applications to ensure high-quality data collection and QA/QC in real time. We're also using smartphone and tablet-based technologies to put mobile diagnostics and healthcare delivery strategies in the hands of healthcare workers. This is just a brief overview of the informed consent process. I have an embedded video here. I'm hoping that it will work. Here we go. So we're enrolling a patient, screening, and this is an overview of the informed consent process in the local language. I consent. We have the option to do a thumbprint or a signature. The participant can sign here. And we continue to go through the informed consent process to ensure that the participant meets eligibility criteria in the local languages. We also operate in 4 languages, none of them English, none of them Hindi, so we have to be able to do real-time data collection in 4 languages simultaneously. We're ensuring that the participant is indeed eligible to participate and continuing to move on with the study itself. I've also just included a couple of very simple screenshots. So in each individual nurse, coordinator, and enumerator has their own iPad or their own smartphone for data collection. They can see the list of patients that they're meant to see that upcoming day. The red is someone who's about to have a visit. They can select scheduling a visit. They can also identify issues that come up, including adverse events. We need to report adverse events within 24 hours to the IRB in the United States. So real-time data collection is urgent, including data collection reporting. We also have the opportunity to identify reasons for not being eligible for study and to confirm eligibility. We also have an opportunity to collect real-time data as part of the study in an ongoing manner. I'd also like to just take a moment to welcome you all to Ithaca. We have 2 things coming up. We are a little bit of a bus ride upstate. We have 2 events coming up I'm really excited about. One is we are hosting a biofortification symposium to honor Howard Lewis, who is the leader of IFPRI at Harvest Plus, in honor of the World Food Prize, as well as several of his co-winners as part of a symposium on Friday, October 21st in Ithaca. I'm also chair of the Cornell Geospatial Forum. We're having our 3rd annual event on Friday, February 10th. It's a very cold, very dark time to come to Ithaca, but I encourage you, it'll be worth the schlep. And also, if you're just passing by casually in central New York, we have a Mappy Hour on many Fridays that plans to grab a beer and talk about geospatial information science and technology. Asante Nisana, thank you so much.
Thank you, Julia. One thing I'd just like to add is when we were kicking off this lightning session and I was talking to Julia, one of the things that came up was local policy and the issues associated with local policy and privacy of data. She has some very interesting perspectives and stories on that, and I think that if anyone's interested in trying to understand how to manage these local policy implications, she's an excellent resource. Okay, with that, I'll welcome John McCarris up and get his presentation going, and we'll have the last of the event. Thank you, John.
So thank you very much. I'm here representing the United Nations World Food Program. Just a quick show of hands, how many people in the audience are familiar with WFP? Okay, great. So I don't have to say too much background information on the organization. Anyways, it's one of the largest humanitarian agencies. We assist about 80 million people in 80 different countries around the world. So bringing us to the prompt and the focus question of the panel, is open data a pipe dream or a global solution? And what I'm taking a position here, saying that it's closer to a global solution to accelerating our move towards zero hunger. But of course, it's not a black and white issue. It's really not binary. I think we're somewhere in the gray zone right now, whereas if the black part of the Venn diagram represents a siloed world, and the white part of the Venn diagram represents an ideal world of open data nirvana, I think we're somewhere in the gray area. And I say that because I'm seeing evidence within my own organization, in my own working context, that data is being opened up. I want to share with you on this slide just a little bit on a project and a capacity that the World Food Program has, which is called MVAM. It's a technical capacity that deals with mobile data collection using remotely collected data, basically calling people on their cell phones and asking them a few questions about their diets, about their eating habits, about their food security situation. This is expanding rapidly. We're in about 20 countries, and if you look at the graph in the lower part of the slide, you'll see that it just started in 2012 and 2013. There's been a big increase. So in 2013, I think we're in just 2 countries, Somalia and DRC, but already in 2016, we're up around 20 countries. So more data flowing, more data open, moving towards big data. If you were to visit the website and if you were to try to get access to this data, this is what you would see. You'd see a data bank, you'd see the data, you'd see indicators about what people are eating, food consumption score data. You'd see data about how households are coping with hunger and malnutrition and food insecurity problems, the types of coping strategies that they're using. You'd see data on markets and food prices at a fairly granular level, subnational, and updated with fairly frequent refresh periods. Other types of data that WFP is contributing into the open data community involves the agroclimatic data. So this is data related to weather shocks, rainfall, NDVI, etc. We have a product called the Seasonal Monitor. It's a data visualization tool. You can easily generate long-term time series data on precipitation patterns, precipitation shocks, NDVI, etc. All of this is open, accessible, easily utilized, and downloadable. Okay. Of course, we know that we can't do it alone, and we're not doing it alone. The previous slides that I showed you were just some examples from our own websites, but we're leveraging other partners' websites. So that means OSHA, other UN agencies. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Humanitarian Data Exchange, but it's a platform that humanitarian agencies use around the world to put their data out there. If you were to access the OSHA HDX website, this is what you would see. Some examples of the WFP top-line data telling you how much money is going out in terms of food assistance, how much of that is going as direct food, how much is going in terms of cash and vouchers, etc. Other types of data, market price data, numbers of people being assisted, again, the food security indicators like food consumption, household coping strategies, etc. There's also data that's coming from our logistics teams that deals with supply routes, storage, food storage that's involved in food assistance and humanitarian operations. We also support transparency initiatives like IATI, so similar to ADATA. Recently, the WFP was recognized as #1 in terms of transparency, in terms of putting our financial data out there, budgetary data, etc. And in closing, I want to say it's not just about accessibility. Of course, it's those other things that we've already talked about in terms of policy, capacity, effective use, changing organizational culture, and data governance. Thank you very much. My time is up.
So we've heard from 5 lightning round speakers. We've heard a number of big ideas. We've heard about big projects. And we've heard about big challenges that we have laying ahead. What we'd like to do now is just thank the lightning round speakers. We'll ask these guys to step down, and we'll invite our next panel up. The lightning round speakers, panelists, be aware of this. The lightning round speakers are provocateurs. They are going to ask some of the hard questions. So we'd like for this session to be very interactive. The people in the audience should be participating in the panel. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Brady Heaton, who we already received a nice introduction, and then the main session is really our privilege to have Brady here. Brady brings a very balanced and wide-ranging perspective to the challenges that we're facing in GODAN. So I'd like to invite Brady up, and then we'll proceed with the event. We welcome the panel up, and you can go ahead and take your seats up here.
While the panel is assembling up here, let me just thank you, Steve, for your generous introduction. And most of you were probably in the earlier session have heard something from me already today. But let me just thank the PUSH, Mark Keenum, who is the chair of the PUSH board, the PUSH steering committee, which I've been happy to serve with him on. And everyone who doesn't know the Auburn crew, with Paula Hunker here, Harriet Giles, and June Hinton. I don't know if they're all in the room, but they deserve a special round of applause. You know, I'm so impressed. I've been so impressed with this entire summit, and particularly with the session that we just heard. And that's a group of very powerful analysts, and they're doing the kind of work that we all aspire to see being done by our faculty and universities, by the CGIAR system around the world. And from someone who comes from a long land-grant experience, it's just thrilling to see the new emphasis on citizen scientist, because it was really the concept of the extension system when it was formed in 1914, the Smith-Weaver Act. It was designed to ensure that we took that land-grant concept. It started with the Morrill Act in 1862, continued then with the Hatch Act for Research in 1874, but it ensured that we took what we were learning out to the field and learned as much as we could from the field and right back into the research labs. So you're doing such an incredible job of bringing this to another generation of trying to accomplish that ideal that can make such a transforming difference in the world. And I'm saying this partly because there are many people who are not from the United States. Here in the U.S., I'm speaking of a system, of course, that has provided about 150 years of sustained central and state government support to agricultural research and knowledge accumulation. And as I said, we're now back to the future in a sense, because we have a generation of students that I highlighted this morning and knowledge generators that can do so much more than we could ever do before. And so the question is that we're confronted with here today, will we be successful in doing this? And in many ways, I like to think back to how did that look, that notion of taking what we were learning and feeding a nation with it in 1862, when the United States was on the brink of a major civil war, and President Lincoln said, no, we're looking long enough into the future to ensure that we have a system of universities around this nation who will educate, create new knowledge, and educate the citizens of our country. That was a major challenge. And with that kind of a magnitude of challenge, today's is one that I say, of course, we will accomplish that. I love the way Glenda a moment ago said she's after presenting all these very real issues that I know we're going to get back to here in a minute. But we're eternal optimists, so therefore we will do it. That's why we're here, that's why we're coming to work every day, and that's why we have such a generation of students who are the most idealistic, excited group of people that I have ever worked with. So again, I salute the students here in the room and those of you in universities, colleges around this nation know just how important they are to what we're going to be doing as we look to the future. So thank you, thanks for this opportunity, thanks for being with you, and I hope that with the help of the panel we can tie some things together and have a discussion with you about what steps we can take next, because I see so many wonderful applications of big data and analysis devoted to critical food security issues and to alleviating extreme hunger. But I want to say, all right, what steps can we take and what concrete ways can we make a big difference? I know PUSH as a group of universities that Dr. Keenum spoke about just a few moments ago is committed to making these steps go forward and to become material in terms of making a difference in what we're doing in the world, in our own society, with the kind of experiences that you saw laid out here earlier today. So we got a fabulous group of experts here with us that we will be continuing to work with today. We've had a number of introductions in panelists, and I wanted to take a moment to introduce each of the panelists here with us, and then we'll ask a specific question about with each of them to start off and let you speak as much as you are prepared to about what you're doing yourself. But Steve Dauphin, I'll start with on the other end, is a venture capital expert and innovator in so many ways, and he's had tremendous experience in advising other groups and creating his own venture capital firms and the kind of market-based technology commercialization strategies that are so vital to all aspects. He's applied it particularly with advanced fertilizer technologies. The Food Security Group and eventually Kirshner Agricultural Partners outgrowth of a presentation he made at a gathering of ag experts at the World Bank in 2010. So he's had the experience of bringing ideas to bear on organizations that then act based on what he has done. He served as an analyst with Citibank. He's helped launch the Harbingers Group's first 2 private equity funds. He's worked as an independent power fund backer with his equity funds, something that now we're seeing with iPhones in many parts of the world, applications, and I'm interested, Steve, in any comments you would have on that. And then he's launched, as I said before, special venture capital funds in many parts of the world. We also have, let me move on to Glenda Humiston, the Vice President for Agriculture and Natural Resources at the University of California System. She spoke to you a few moments ago, so I won't belabor her background so much as saying she served under 2 administrations and key agricultural, deputy agricultural positions in the Department of Agriculture, as Dr. Keenum discussed in his introduction of a few moments ago. And then we have as the third panelist, Matthew McNaughton, who's Executive Director of the Slashroots Foundation, a civic tech nonprofit building technology, who's focused on civic nonprofit building technology in communities to address the development issues in the Caribbean. He's a native of Jamaica, I understood in earlier conversations with him, and has some links with other parts of the Caribbean as well. He focuses on the process for which institutions become more data-driven, utilizing open data, user-centered design, and beneficiary feedback loops, emphasizing local capacity building and tech ecosystem developments. So that's a powerful background that will provide some real practical examples to the concerns that have been expressed in somewhat more general ways with some specific examples that have been given. I'm going to begin, Steve, if I may, by just opening this up to you, and I'd be interested in a little more if you want to provide a little more background on your passion for what you're doing, because I know that's very strong, and particularly any restrictions you see, and this has been talked about a bit earlier too, about the interface between open data systems and more restricted private data that's necessary in these cases to make our entire venture capital system operate. Let me turn to you.
Thank you, Brady. When you made the introduction and you acknowledged that I was a finance guy, and everyone in the room knew that I was the dumbass who couldn't figure out how to get my number to show up on the screen. And mine took 2 minutes longer than everyone else. I'm afraid I've been exposed right off the bat. Great to be here today. Yes, I'm a director with the Kirshner Impact Foundation. We have a for-profit arm that tries to make investments in great companies that do solve problems, but do it in a for-profit way. We also have an impact, a nonprofit arm of the foundation, which is particularly focused on trying to find new ways to allocate small amounts of venture capital into the places where it's needed most. That's the Kirshner Food Fellowship Program. Fundthefood.com is the website. And again, we're trying to experiment with new techniques for capital allocation. But Brady, one thought that I think, I've learned quite a bit here. I'm not an ag expert like some of the folks in the room and the panelists here. But one comment that I've said many times, and I've heard thousands of times, and it's the starting point of this conversation, is often that we have this daunting challenge of doubling food supply between now and 2050. And that is a scary proposition. However, if you grow something at 2.06% for 34 years, it doubles. So I think the number that should be in our head is 2%, not 100% in terms of the double. Again, there's certain currents cutting against us, making the problem harder. But can we grow at 2% a year and solve these problems? And at one level, I'm completely optimistic. In fact, I would tell you that in certain geographies, it's a done deal. It's a no-brainer. It's already done. We see company after company after company that is doing a 30% yield increase over here, 40% waste reduction over there, huge percentage, huge value creations that make me feel that getting that 2% a year is a layup. It's a layup. The problem isn't that's not the problem. The problem is a geography problem. I mean, to me, and I'm not an expert, I haven't been at it as long as most folks, but the problem is how in the heck do we get those solutions everywhere they need to be? And that's one of the things that I do love about the backbone of what's happening here at GODAN. The future is now, it's just not very equal. And so I think in the lighting sessions, one of the things I love most in those presentations were the very specific roadblocks, the very specific problems, whether they be at the data level, like how the heck are we going to make this data usable, or even more directly, at the feet on the street level. With Samantha and Charles and Julia who said, I got this problem here, how the heck do I solve that problem? How do I have electricity? How do I have internet? So these very practical on-the-ground problems, I believe, are the real essence of the energy need. And I think GODAN is up here at the information aggregation level with the natural and necessary complement of that. And I think what is getting exposed because of the effort to push this information out of those very practical, real roadblocks that have to be overcome and will be difficult to overcome. So those are just some first thoughts.
Wonderful, excellent, thank you. And Glenn, if you want to build any of those thoughts, or I'd be interested in your perspective. You shared so many of the way in which we feel overwhelmed by data. The reservoir, Charles mentioned that also. It's a fabulous illustration, I think, of what many of us feel today. Trying to get off the social media so we have some time to work. Yet the challenge of GODAN is to enable us to manage that data and find increasingly effective ways to make a practical application of it. And I can make some examples from my own research where the penetration you get with very applied research in Kenya, which I undertook, you find out information that is not available unless you undertake that specific research. But can you do enough of that to aggregate in the absence of the national approach to that? And I know you illustrated many of these examples of things you work with various localities across the state of California. But we don't think in terms of county always. Labor sheds don't fit county borders very well. And so how do we make progress in this categorization process? That's really a key question from my standpoint.
Not this session anyway. That's a great question, and you know the really easy answer is there's not going to be one big solution. There's going to be a whole lot of little tiny solutions. You know that one app I mentioned at the end, we've hosted 4 hackathons so far, and I gotta tell you, I'm so excited at lunch to see the winner from this one here, because the ones we've done, I cannot believe what these people come up with in 48 hours. Pizza and caffeine evidently is magical. But, you know, at our last one, we had our finalists actually present at the state fair, and the audience was just blown away too. The winner there was a little app, and they even had developed some software. An app that basically let people, it was kind of like an Uber sort of thing for food. So if you had a home garden and you had too much zucchini or tomatoes or whatever, you could actually put on there what you had, and they actually built a safety factor in too. They had built in, I don't pretend to understand how they did it, but you wouldn't just have the casual stranger showing up at your house, there was an in-between. But it basically let you get that food someplace where it needed to be. I've seen apps like that built around reducing food waste. One of our winners at an earlier one was, they called it a dating service for bugs. And it was a way to reduce pests without having to use chemicals. I mean, I just pulled those out as examples because I think they are a great example of a few smart people getting together with a little bit of data, a problem, and finding a solution. The challenge is going to be how do we scale those up? How do we share the fact that those are happening out there so that we can not waste time reinventing the wheel all the time or duplicating a lot of stuff? And how do we get more people interested in pursuing these kind of solutions? It's been fascinating to watch. The very first one we did, we had to actually purposefully drag the coders in with the Young Farmers and Ranchers organization, who were the ones we were able to convince that this might be a worthwhile effort. And now we're trying to drag 4-H and Future Farmers of America in. And the next step is we want to actually get they themselves coding. So we don't have to bring the coders from the urban area, that we can get people doing it all over the place. So just a few thoughts, but it's going to be it's real exciting to see what the opportunities are.
That's wonderful, and you know, I appreciate those comments. Growing up in 4-H and doing that throughout my early life was very important in some of the skills I learned. And now, as President Keenum implied earlier, we've learned to get out of the way from a generation that is moving at a much more rapid pace than anything we ever dreamed of. But that can be implanted into much of the youth organization. It's going to be one of the big challenges globally as we look down the road. Is how do we develop and provide that human capital, that human capability and skills with the bulging population for youth, particularly in Africa and other parts of the world.
Well, and let's not think it's all youth either, because simultaneously with our efforts there, we're basically creating a rural and ag and natural resource version of SCORE. Those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's the Service Corps of Retired Executives. So we're really reaching out to some of our retired cooperative extension folks and retired ag teachers and just retired farmers for that matter, and saying, hey, we need you to come in and work with these teams and mentor, and if they do have an app that may, or a new piece of equipment or something like that that's innovative, help them actually get that into use, get it commercialized, get it out there, have people sharing it. We need everybody working on this.
Matthew, let me turn to you because you've had real specific experience in doing a range of these initiatives. So share some of that with us. What you're doing sounds very exciting and interesting.
I think it's afternoon everyone. Yeah, I think the discussion has been very good, and I hope the point I'm about to make doesn't necessarily come out as provocative. part of the challenge that we have to engage with is the fact, is really how do we build and make a lot of these things accessible in the resource and constrained environments in which the small holder farmer exists. And I mean, there is an open question about whether the small holder farmer is going to be necessary or key to actually achieving some of those that the growth or doubling of our food production between now and 2050. And you could imagine the scaling of our operations of scale could facilitate that. But if we are trying to be inclusive, what does this look like for them? Our work, we've been working with the Ministry of Agriculture in Jamaica and a couple of the islands in the Caribbean. And one of the things that has been quite interesting is, well, what does the process of building those institutions and those capacities look like on the ground? In the Jamaican context, what's been even a bigger challenge is that the farming population is actually aging. The average age of the farmer in Jamaica is 65, though it's come down to 60 in the last year. And so you're talking about a population that is not necessarily literate, much less digitally literate. And the aspect of our work that we've been engaging with the ministry the most about over the last few months is, I think there was a conversation earlier about, I think Charles made a great point about, the growth of the velocity of usage. How do we increase that? What does that look like on the ground? And also just the other challenge that I think the conversation around privacy, which has been something that is spoken about a lot at this session. And the question that we've been exploring, can you protect the farmer's right to privacy while also serving their interests? Because we're doing some work. The extension offices, they're constantly trying to engage and connect farmers between markets and farmers between different opportunities. But there's not always an explicit consent when those things happen. We keep talking to farmers like, well, I need to get access to markets, so they're perfectly fine with their information being moved. But this idea of where does privacy, where does consent fit into those things? How do you engage with someone around consent when they don't necessarily have the connectivity that will facilitate that? Are all parts of the challenges of how do we engage the smallholder farmer on the ground in terms of making this data revolution inclusive. So that's some initial thoughts.
Oh, wonderful. This has been, do we open up to audience, Paula, at this point? Yes.
As well as the mic. We have a mic here, so anybody who wants to ask a question, if you can line up.
I said, with a group like this, it would be a shame to lose this opportunity, it seems to me. So if anyone who wants to ask questions back and forth with the panelists, or perhaps the panelists, this last group that had such rich data sets and perspectives on illustrating what they were doing in different parts of the world was quite fabulous, I thought. And the opportunity, Steve asked this very pointed question about how do we actually measure the progress, as I've captured what you were saying, Steve, the progress that we're shooting for in terms of, and are we measuring effectively, moving toward open data, toward making these practical applications, moving, it's a process of organizing ourselves to undertake the research as well as focusing on the specific targets of capital accumulation at the household level. Often we're not even capturing the measures in many parts of the world where we can actually measure that. So data is not always the same data from one country to the other in that respect.
And we've got to keep in mind too that we've got to really take a comprehensive look at the issue. Lately I've been running into a lot of folks who hear this comment about we've got to feed 8 or 9 billion people, we've got to have 30-40% more production. And then they turn around and say, oh, but 40% of the food we grow is wasted in the world. All we need to do is just solve that waste problem. Well, maybe, but let's think about it for a second. As we talk about what's going to be happening in 20 and 30 and 50 years, we're paving over millions of farmland every single year. That's a factor. That's not replaceable. We've got climate change to deal with. That's going to throw some areas that currently produce food at a certain level into maybe a different level. We've got invasive species and pest trap going all over the planet at speeds we've never dealt with before. These are all factors that have to be taken into account too. And all too often, some of the data folks are like, oh no, we can crunch the data, we're going to solve this problem, we're going to improve transport. But it's much more complex than that.
Yeah, I spoke recently to a member of one of the innovation labs, USAID the innovation labs working at Kansas State. I started reading literature from actually Kansas State's been a real pioneer in this effort of food losses. And it's been about 30% ever since I can remember what's happened here. And it's a case, I think, of data, of definitions changing. Earlier information that did not fully account for what constituted food waste, food spoilage, and new information that deals with it in a more robust way. Yet if you go into just that issue of food waste, it's a workshop itself just to define the term and the various conditions that can arise in the Caribbean area.
There's two completely different kinds of food waste. There's the waste from the farm to a consumer, which in much of the world is a lack of storage facilities, transportation, processing. But then there's the waste, which predominantly in the U.S. and other developed countries is after the consumer gets it home and doesn't know how to handle it properly. I mean, that's two very different situations.
So you gave me a lead into my question. On this argument, do we solve this problem with big ag, or do we solve it with small problem, small farm? I'm on the side that we solve it with a small farm. So the data that we're collecting, it's hard to understand how that helps him. So the small farmer has a bigger problem, that's distribution. How does he get the product from the field to the table? I believe we help that by starting the data solution there. So I helped start a standards group back in the 1970s. And I decided that what we would start with is the place where everybody complained about the data was not reliable, it's hard to access. So we started at the point of collection of the raw data. I believe for us to be successful, we need to keep working on what we're working on the masses of data. But we need to go to the small farm and make that our collection point and make that the base of our architecture. So we have to find a way to focus on providing that small farm the tools to make our data collection real time. Everything in the system has to become real time or we're not going to be successful. And if we don't start at the small end, we'll never make it real time. My opinion, I'm sorry. Thank you.
You're raising, to me, that's a fundamental kind of question that I would like to throw back to the panel, because we talk a lot about big data, yet in my own research, in fact, I worked, John, on a rural food program in Kenya many years ago, analyzing capital formation at the household level, for which there basically was no data that we could find at all. There's now a small amount of data. Talking to my colleagues at the University of California, Davis, in fact, Michael Carter has been doing some work that assures me he's got really good measures. And that goes right to the heart of what Steve raised a moment ago about what rate of return are you looking at to really make a difference over time. And that's been ignored among economists at the household level. It's been ignored to an incredible degree. It's a real concern, so I would emphasize that.
And I want to really throw the question over here because the point you raise is great, but it begs the question. So you've got data. Who's going to put the money up to build the cold storage or the processing plant or the aggregation hub? And I'm so thrilled with the finance guy at the table.
Sure, I think figuring the connection points between for-profit business and this initiative are very, very important. And we touched on it in the earlier session about research, for example. Could real research agreements, collaborative research agreements between for-profit institutions and universities evolve so that maybe it says, okay, this will be private data for 15 years inside our product on these countries, but in these other countries, maybe there's a shorter window, maybe it's 2 or 3, because they're really not going to move the needle for us anyway. So I think there's going to have to be some real evolution of that kind of, the nature of the research and data production between for-profit and universities. also think kind of almost every sentence that we say when we talk about solving these problems needs to almost end with saying, so that the farmer can make more money, or that so that the service provider to the farmer can be profitable. Like every sentence needs to end with that. And again, I'll be a little provocative here. And listen, so to me, the two miracles of development are, the first one is the seed, which is this amazing thing. You put it in the ground and it produces something of much more value than the inputs. The second is mutual exchange for voluntary benefit, all right, which in this country we typically think of as a form of free market capitalism in various degrees. But everything out that window, every road, building, street, everything we carry around, is in some way, shape, or form, almost everything, the result of profit in some form. Profit that was either taxed and reused, profit that was either earned and given away, or profit that was reinvested by the company. So all of our efforts, I believe, need to have, it's the big engine. I mean, and listen, to be clear, there's kind of, in my book, three types of companies, three types of for-profit entities. There are the ones that, I should say cultures. There's the ones that really don't give a damn. There's those that do give a damn, and there are those that pretend to give a damn, right? And most of them are the latter. Most of us are the latter. So we want to connect with the ones that do give a damn. And there's this fantastic movement in that direction, largely millennial inspired, but also investors are seeing that those teams that are motivated by something more than just the single bottom line tend to outperform those over time that are. So I think, a comment, again, we to always think about the profitability of the farmer, the service providers that can deliver those things, and then also working with companies that are the good actors.
I'd like to add one more thing to that, though, too, because at least in the U.S. and some other parts of the world, we've got a very powerful nonprofit sector as well who can play a real key role here. And just to give you a key example, we've done a lot of work in California and other states have as well on trying to improve small farmer access to institutional buyers, such as the school lunch program. And the problem you run into immediately when you do a program like that is you can't have 30 or 40 farmers backing up a truck with raw product to the cafeteria in the morning. The school lunch ladies don't like that. They can't work with it. You gotta have somebody somewhere who's getting that raw product and doing a little initial processing, even if it's just washing it and maybe dicing it and putting it into bags and then making sure that one box has 10 different things in it. Somebody's gotta do that. And the bottom line is, those aggregation hubs do not pencil out. And I say that from several years of, I financed feasibility studies, I financed a few of them that went bankrupt. They don't pencil out. So what are you gonna do? We tried to solve that by partnering up with food banks. Because if you think about a food bank, it's a big building with a lot of shelves and cold storage and a loading dock and a truck. Sounds like an aggregation hub to me. And food banks are constantly trying to raise money. If you can organize them so they have a for-profit piece that does the aggregation, it can support their nonprofit efforts of, fighting hunger too. And as we move forward with that kind of partnership, it's really proving to be powerful for both entities. So my message is we've really got to be innovative about how we put different pieces together and how we look for solutions.
You're saying the mix of public-private capital requires new measures, new definitions, and new combinations that we hadn't thought about before. In every aspect of this macro change, it seems to me, from smallholders to the aggregate notion of feeding everyone because we can produce it, there's a whole lot of middle ground, and all that middle ground depends on capital investments and private as well as public partnerships and competitions at times, but hopefully the efficiency of the partnerships can bring to that. Yes, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, good afternoon. At the beginning, we have seen the little online survey that you ran, and we were are being asked, is big data and open data going to end or achieve zero hunger? And most of the answers were saying yes, but with great investment, or yes, but with a great innovation. I didn't answer none of them. I have a big uncertainty because having worked for more than 14 years at the private sector, I'm talking food industry, I would like to know which would be the key message that I would like to bring back to Europe in this case, to sell the food industry. Hey, you need to enroll, you need to take on this journey. Because it's, for them, we cannot avoid to think that they are afraid of losing competitiveness. Which kind of data can we expect that they are going to share? And are those data useful for our major goal? If that, I really think that it's not about convince them, it's about that maybe we need a change of paradigm in the business model that we may have in mind for the private sector. Because the business as usual, they are really afraid of losing competitiveness. If I provide some data, I may be less competitive to my neighbor. You were mentioned before about the farmers and how competitive they are. Food industry is not much different. And some of the data are really not so nice to show. For instance, the bigger retailers are one of the major sources of food waste. And these are sensible data that I don't want to share openly because it's like a shame, sort of a shame. And they want to improve it, but it's to open up that, we say in Spanish, to open up that melon, that watermelon is not a nice thing to do. So how can we reach this kind of private sector? If you have an idea. Thank you.
I think Matthew was saying, so talking about this on the farm level, some of that dynamic, but the big existing companies are going to be very difficult to turn. I think to threaten them is probably the best way to turn them. Now, they have a lot to lose, so rationally they're very conservative. A new company, an aggressive, fast-growing company with a different cultural framework, doesn't have much to lose. I mean, they have the investors' capital to lose, and I want them to be careful with that. But they can take risks. And I think we see it in our portfolio companies. More of them now are beginning to, for example, we have a company that manages intersections in a different way. And it's now putting its mistakes forward. These are things that aren't working. These are problems that we can't solve, and exposing them to their customer base. That's a completely new mindset. And I think more companies, younger, rapidly growing companies, have that mindset. And I think until the big companies see that it's safe, see that it can be done without harming them, they probably won't change. So I think it has to be some mix of example and some mix of threat.
But I also would say that the other option, and I mentioned it this morning in the plenary session, is that is a role universities can really play a powerful role in, is the boundary organization. For decades, private sector companies have been willing to share data as long as it remained proprietary, as long as it had certain protections, so that larger research questions could be looked at. And I think you still see that. There's even more potential for that kind of opportunity. And you know, you mentioned food companies and grocery stores, that kind of firm. They are sitting on mountains of data that would be fascinating to do a lot of research with. So I do think we've got to start getting them to the table more than we have.
Yeah, just a quick point on this one, because I think a lot of what it sounds like you're talking about is the politics of disclosure in many ways. And I think that varies at times depending on the type of audience and kind of the circumstances you're mentioning. I mean, I think, you know, in the work that we've been doing so far, I think, you know, farmers, I mean, they're particularly interested in market opportunities, ways to grow their revenue, and in as much, particularly smallholder farmers, and in as much as things are serving that outcome, there's willingness to open that up. The other side of that, which was interesting, thinking about the ministry, which in some regards, Ministry of Agriculture, that we were interacting with in the Caribbean, they play this custodian role of data. And there's a lot more hesitancy to share information at times because no one wants to be the person that released all of the farmers' information to the public or to the wrong business person. And then I think in the private sector space, I think there can be that disclosure depending on the terms. I think in the case, one example we're looking at was the poultry sector, which is traditionally very highly kind of secretive, but the government had set up these arrangements where different players in the poultry sector were sharing information that was then anonymized, but then shared back to all of the players. And so they established these data partnerships that seem to be mutually beneficial for different types of actors. So I think it's also trying to, in kind of engaging around those politics, and trying to understand what are the levers that are most important to the actors you're engaging with.
Time for maybe one more question.
Okay. To finish off, I just wanted to ask, apologies, the whole room equipment, it's been a long time since it's been in the band. I wanted to ask a question of not only the panel but everybody else. There's one divide that we don't really hear talking about too much. It was alluded to a minute ago, and it's really the age divide when you're dealing with these questions. Inside academia, inside government, inside the private sector, there are those that my age and up. I started programming in COBOL, if that tells you a little bit about how old I am. And there are young Turks that are charging forward, and then there's a barrier that they run smack into somewhere between 45 and 50-year-old management that prevents it. I see it at the ministerial level, at the agribusiness level. It's a real issue in terms of how to put solutions in motion and to change these cultural things. So the question is, has anybody had any real success and can share any advice, and this is a very self-serving question, by the way, on how to start bridging those divides between the digital natives and the digitally distrustful in an institutional setting, because it is important. It's important from the farmers all the way through the institutions and the governments that they serve, and I haven't seen a lot of work in this arena, either practical or research-based. And I guess I'll throw it open to the whole audience as the very last question, because I think it's an important question.
Does anyone on the panel want to make a comment on that?
I'll make one quick comment. Every one of our portfolio companies, they have a strategic planning session. If they do not have digitally native people in the room, it is not a strategic planning session. It's just not. And so, but that is an awareness. That is a change. That has happened in the last handful of years, really.
What need to do?
I don't know, but I don't know how we get more of that, but I agree with you, it's desperately needed. It's logical, and it's the only way to have a chance to get across the future. Because I can't do it, I have to think about it, it's not negative.
So, Lockie, stand up. So that's the group you're talking about, right? Well, she came looking for me because she saw that I was doing something that was significantly socially beneficial. And yes, I do plan to make money.
Thank you. I think we're needing to wrap this up at this point, and I want to first ask for a big thanks to a very, very capable and talented panel. Paul, with thanks to you, we'll turn the mic over to you.
As everybody's getting down, I won't even get back up. I wanted just a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, I want to apologize because I think I very rudely forgot to introduce myself. So, in all my excitement to introduce everyone else. So I'm Paula Gray-Hunker, and I'm the director at the Hunger Solutions Institute at Auburn University, which is the secretariat of PUSH, which you heard a lot about. I wanted to say two things. One is everybody has in front of them a feedback form. They're only asking you 2 quick questions. If you could fill this out, this would be great. Second thing is, unless any of the panelists or participants have an objection, all of the PowerPoints will be available on the GODAN site. So if you want to get more information with that. The third thing is, I don't know if people have been seeing or noticed the artist in the back, but every session has been, I think it's called Drawalism, and they're really kind of cool. So take a look at that. You can see it, it's there now, and then it's going to be framed in the back. So thank you, everybody.